Hello, nerds for Yang.
Hello, nerds!
Hello, nerds!
Hello, nerds!
Hello, nerds! So nerds!
Hello, nerds!
Hello,
Now with this
nerds!
campaign, bang, dang, it's and Drew, come roll with the Yang Gang.
Hello, nerds.
Hello, nerds.
Carlos Cardona from New Hampshire. Welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you for having me. And I should probably say, hola, nerds.
Hola, nerds. Yes, indeed. I actually had a few of my old videos not transcribed, but voiced over in Spanish.
That's
and
awesome.
They definitely whipped out the hola, nerds there.
That's awesome. Love it.
So for those who are not familiar with you, Carlos, I was doing some Googling and I noticed like you've had some big time guests come to your house. Tell us a little bit about like who you are. And then of course we'll have to touch on all the celebrity folks that have crossed paths with you. But who is Carlos Cardona?
Thank you. Well, first of all, thank you to Hello Nerds for having me. It's like a huge honor and a humbling experience. Carlos Cardona, if I had to say who he is, he's a 30 years old guy that is boycotting his birthday this year because 2020 is not planning out to be a great year. So I'm going to boycott this year. And I'm a father to an LGBTQ dad to two amazing kids, a 6-month-old and a 5-year-old, a partner to an amazing guy. We've been together 14 years. I'm from Aguadilla, Puerto Rico, and I came here at the age of 12 looking for a better life, just looking for a better opportunity. And basically, I decided at the age of 18 to run for office, and that has completely changed my life. Basically, I've been fighting since the age of 18 for the most vulnerable in our society. I found myself for a couple of months homeless. So I found myself instantly fighting for homeless people and how we can basically treat them better and give them housing opportunities in our communities. So that's who Carlos Cardona is. Oh, and I forget the most important, a Puerto Rico activist and climate change activist who is hoping to highlight the effects of climate change in our world, not just in our home states, but also across the world. So
how in the world did you end up in the Granite State? It's not known for a large Puerto Rican community. So I was super interested in hearing that story as well.
Yeah, well, I have to say, I was shocked when I heard that there are 15,000 Puerto Ricans living in the state of New Hampshire, but that's a fact. There are about 47,000 Latinos in the state of New Hampshire, which is a pretty large population for such a small state. And basically, I decided to move here at the age of 15. I came out as LGBTQ, and it was rough at home. My mom was going through cancer, and I basically couldn't. I just couldn't handle the situation at home that we were having. And of course, growing up Catholic, it was very tough. So basically, I decided to leave home on my own and hope for a better future. So I was basically homeless for about 9 months. I met my partner, and he felt very compelled to help me after we had been dating, and he found out the truth that I was homeless, and we got an apartment together and we just worked up from there. So that's kind of how I ended up in New Hampshire.
Got it. So your partner had already been living in New Hampshire, or
yeah, he's originally from here.
There?
No, he's originally from here. He's from Laconia, and I was living in Massachusetts, which is borders New Hampshire. When I moved to New Hampshire, I moved to Franklin, New Hampshire, where I had some friends. I was living on a tent for a little while, and then we decided to get an apartment after dating for a while.
Right on. Well, congratulations on that wonderful kind of confluence of events. It sounds like you could have ended up really badly being,
Yeah.
without a home at such a young age. So
Yeah.
I'm glad that all worked out. Yeah.
Yeah. New Hampshire at the time had the highest homeless youth rates in the country, which I actually ended up on a homeless youth task force that the governor had created. That was my first involvement in politics, telling my story. And I actually did wake up a couple of times where I found out some of my friends that lived in the same river on a tent had passed away from either drug overdoses or multiple issues. So it's a really terrible reality that many Americans are living that we oftentimes don't talk about, or we don't like talking about because it's not a Disney fairy tale story. So I happen to be very fortunate, and my story turned out pretty good and had a good ending, but or so far has had a good ending. But a lot of my friends didn't. And I remember losing a good friend who was 21 years old who died of a drug overdose because, this is what society had pushed him to the edge. So this is what happens when we allow homelessness to continue to thrive in our communities. So we need to do everything possible to address homelessness. I think that's the root of all evil in America comes down to poverty. So I think if we address that as leaders and as whatever our role in life is, I think we'll make this planet a better one. So,
one of the things that we were talking about before we went live was I put up this nice New Hampshire background for our conversation. By the way, thanks to all the channel members of Nerds for Humanity for supporting the channel. I use the money to invest in equipment like this green screen that allows me to do this fun stuff. But one of the things that is a little bit of like some cognitive dissonance is you have these beautiful New England states, but you also have like a serious opioid crisis problem. I mean, I went to school in Maine, and I hear Maine is really in a tough spot right now with some of its communities. And I'm curious, are you seeing that in New Hampshire as well? And I'm guessing you think it's tied to the poverty stuff, or what do you think is going on?
There's no question in my mind that it's tied down to poverty. So basically, New Hampshire had in 1 year over 457 deaths due to drug opioid crisis that was happening. And I hate to call it a crisis because it's been going on for before I was even born. This is nothing new. Unfortunately, because of media, social media, it's becoming the new thing to talk about. But we should have been addressing this a long time ago. But I do believe that it's tied into poverty, or at least most of it, if not all. When you offer people opportunities and you offer them health insurance and mental health, they're able to address the issues that they're dealing with. Let's think about the people who don't have access to mental health. A lot of the times it tends to be basically the most vulnerable in our population, people poverty stricken. So to me, I'm seeing it in my community. I mean, New England is getting hit so hard. These rural white communities. You're also seeing in the South very Latino neighborhoods that are getting hit really hard, or Black communities that are getting hit hard. So to me, it comes down to poverty. I've seen it firsthand. I was very fortunate that I never ended up doing drugs, so I never went that path. So I will never pretend to understand exactly 100% what is going through people's mind and lives when this is happening. But from what I've seen, I've lost 3 friends and 1 brother-in-law who died due to the drug crisis. And I can tell you, every single one of their situations, they were homeless. They were from job to job. A lot of them were discriminated or targeted by the police, which kept putting them deeper into the economic struggle. A lot of people are going from court to court dealing with, legal issues, which gives them less opportunities for better paying jobs. A lot of them end up being denied for health insurance because of this. So it's just, it's really a sad situation in our country. So I do believe that a lot of it has to do with poverty. So if people had access to like Medicare for All, for example, which I'm a big proponent of, I know a lot of guys that go to rehab, a silver home, and basically when they get out, they get a job, a decent paying job, and then they lose their health insurance. So they lose access to their doctors, to their mental health, and then they start spiraling down again. So it's a very vicious cycle. And health insurance is not cheap. I mean, for a perfect example, while I was employed, for a family of 4, it was $1,600. That's for me, my partner, and 2 kids. I couldn't sustain that. I couldn't keep paying that. So while I don't have a drug issue, so I didn't have to worry about that right away. I mean, for my kids' sake, I needed health insurance. So for a person that is dealing with a drug abuse issue or anything mental related, it's just a devastating situation.
Carlos, tell me a little bit about your run for office now. It sounds like you've been involved in community organizing and I guess running for public service in the past. What are you going for now, and why?
Well, I am running for state representative, Belknap County District 3. The reason why is because I feel that in this position, I'll be able to address some of these issues that we've been talking about, some laws that need to be passed. For example, legalizing cannabis use in the state, and for people to be able to grow it in their homes. That's very important. So I want to address some of these issues that affect people across our state. The other thing is I want to be an advocate for young families. Right now, we don't have a paid medical family leave, which is affecting families. My mom has cancer. If I ever have to take time off from work, it's hard to afford it, to be able to stay home with your family and be able to take care of them. So I want to be able to make sure that I'm an ally there for minorities and also for the working class. In the state of New Hampshire, we have one of the largest state houses in the country and one of the oldest, and not just oldest because the building is old. It really is one of the oldest buildings, but it's also by age. And I'm not trying to be ageist here, but we have a lack of representation of young people in our state house. Out of over 400 members, the average age is like over 60. So to me, that's troubling because one, it's keeping the state from getting new ideas, passing policies that make sense for the working class. When you have a class of retirement representatives in the state house, you fail to address the needs of the working class. So that's why I'm running. I'm a working class member of society. I'm an LGBTQ dad, and I want to make sure that we have an ally and a fighter for all these issues that we believe in. And on top of it, I truly believe that we need a new kind of leadership. You know, you oftentimes hear people talking about politics and parties. I want to stop that. I want to stop. This is the reason why Andrew Yang had endorsed me, because him and we understand the importance of that. We need to stop playing politics as usual. We need to say how it is. We need to tell our story where we're at, and politicians need to hear us regardless of the party they're in. UBI is another thing that we're talking about, and Medicare for all. This is something that, you know, for example, UBI, that Andrew Yang is a huge proponent of. Of course, he was the one that educated me on the ground on this. If it wasn't for him, I'm not sure that I would have been as open-minded. So this is why it's important that we have new faces in roles of leaderships in our communities, so that we can hear new opinions and new thoughts and ideas where it's going to make our nation better, in our states, in our communities.
Tell me a little bit about your interactions with Andrew. What was your initial impression when you first heard about his candidacy, and what's it been like since then?
So, I mean, I had just been elected chairman of the City of Laconia Democrats Party, and I had one vision. My vision was that I want to lift my community no matter what it took. And basically, when Andrew Yang was running for office, I had heard he was having an event in Manchester, which is about 45 minutes to an hour away from me. Most candidates didn't come up here, historically speaking, in politics. So I was like, you know what? If they don't come to us, I'm going to go to them so that we can talk politics, and I can tell them my story, and I can tell them the story about my city and why we need to lift rural America. And this is why Donald Trump won. I mean, Donald Trump went here by 14 points. And the reason why is because people here felt heard by him. Whether he actually did anything about it is a whole different conversation, and we know where that goes. But so I wanted to talk to whatever presidential candidate I could, and he was the first one on my list. And I think it was meant to be, because when I went there was a crowd of about 60 people, and he was giving out his book, and then he was doing a question and answer. And so I was like, I'm not shy. So I raised my hand and I introduced myself, and he's like, wait, I like what this guy is saying. And then he's like, the crowd laughed, and he's like, by the way, I did not plant him here. And I was like, I can guarantee you guys he didn't. So from that point on, he gave me his cell phone. He's like, let's talk, because I want to go to your city and I want to listen to you guys' struggle. And I said, awesome. So I was like excited, because my goal was to get at least one presidential candidate to my city and like just have our voice be heard. That's all I wanted. I wanted a fair chance for us to be able to tell our story, our struggles. And he came. He was the first candidate. I actually organized a couple of other events for him throughout the state. And we just formed a really good relationship. And I remember going on vacation a month afterwards. And, like most of us, we bring a book with us to read. And I was like, well, this guy is really interesting. And it's a topic I'm not familiar with. So not that I like to read politics while I'm on vacation, but I was like, it doesn't hurt. So I started reading his book, and I was so moved by it that I decided to text him. And I was like, you've taught me a lot. And he's like, good, let's keep working together. And obviously on his end, he was working towards an endorsement. And I was working towards like, how can I continue to live my city while at the same time as a political leader, like how can I learn more about these issues that I'm not aware of and that I don't know anything about? Because I don't claim to know it all. My whole journey is to listen and tell my story and tell other people's stories as I go through this journey. So he kept coming to our city. I think he like topped every candidate by coming here like 10 times. And every single event, it just got busier and busier. And I live in one of the most conservative communities in my district. And then I started seeing Yang signs popping up. And I was like, wait a second, this guy's speaking to my conservatives. I was like, this is good. There's something here that we're on the same wavelength. So then he started hiring. I love when campaigns hire locals, especially people that I know that are good people. So he hired Steve Marchand, who had ran for governor, who's an excellent progressive. Then Sam Hayden and like so many others. And then he got endorsed by a good friend of mine, lawyer up in Plymouth, New Hampshire, Paul Phillip. And I just started seeing how aligned we were. So I kept the relationship. But he had a tremendous, if not the most impact in my community out of any presidential candidate. Because then I think it set a little bit of jealousy among the other presidential candidate, how much attention he was getting here. And so then Tulsi came here, then Elizabeth Warren. And then, of course, as you read in the Washington Post article, I became the only person in the country to have hosted pretty close to all presidential candidates at my house. But I have to say, if it wasn't for him, that would have probably never happened. And of course, my story, who knows if it would have ever been heard. The Washington Post story that tells my story, the good and the bad, was thanks to this kind gesture of this one guy running for office who barely nobody knew at the time. I always said I know Andrew Yang before he was cool. And he was willing to share my story with people and lift me up. And this is what this is all about. That's the American dream, lifting each other up. And how can we be better neighbors? And I think that's how you win Republican minds, independent minds, libertarian, Democrats. People are sick and tired of politics as usual. And I think that was what was so fresh about Andrew Yang. And I have nothing but good things to say. As a matter of fact, if you read the Washington Post article, he said that if I ever run for president, he'll endorse me too. So I got it lined up.
That's a great start. Yeah.
Yeah. I hope he runs again. The party can use his fresh take, his youthfulness. He's so fun on the campaign trail. He was always so upbeat. He's like me. He speaks with his hands, and it's just he's just a phenomenal guy all around. So I learned so much from him, and I have so much to thank him for. So.
What do you think happened in New Hampshire with the campaign and with Yang's campaign. I mean, I wasn't shocked that he struggled in Iowa, given the amount of resources that other candidates were putting into it. But I guess I always had this impression of New Hampshire kind of being a little bit of an independent place that might have some closet libertarians coming over. And, I mean, ultimately he got like 3% or 2.8% or something like that. Why do you think he didn't do better?
I mean, it comes down to resources. I know he put a lot of resources here on the ground, but I mean, I didn't see him as a failure. I saw him as a success. He was literally the definition, and I mean this respectfully, the definition of, like me, a nobody who came out of nowhere. Nobody knew who he was in the state of New Hampshire. And keep in mind, New England likes familiarity. They know things that they know what to expect from these politicians. Like, for example, Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren. Like, those were very familiar faces. Mm-hmm. I actually expected Elizabeth Warren to do tremendously well, and she actually did very poorly here. I was shocked that her campaign ran as far as it did. I was like, after a defeat like that one in the state of New Hampshire, I was like, that doesn't look good. Mm-hmm. So I actually was proud of what Andrew Yang was able to accomplish. We have to remember, it takes a huge amount of money anywhere, it doesn't matter what state it is, to hire people, to have campaigns on the ground. And the fact that he was able to get as many votes as he did, I was very impressed. He even got some prominent endorsements that I was like very shocked by. I was like, wow, this guy is making headwaves. So New Hampshire is the type of place that you have to run a couple of times before you actually get it right. So my advice to the Yang Gang is, like, don't give up. I mean, this is a really good start for him. That said, I thought he did very well compared to, there was some. Number one, there was way too many candidates, and number two, there were some really big heavy hitters in the ground. Like, it's hard to go against somebody like Bernie Sanders. I mean, I give props to Yang for trying to get his message across when Bernie's running on the ground, because I don't know that I would have the strength to do it. Somebody like Elizabeth Warren, where she was pretty popular at the beginning. Senator Harris, who, like, she was seen at first, but she flopped big time here in the state. She had a strong start. Then you had Joe Biden, who, like, I thought he did very poorly here too. I was shocked that he didn't do better, because he's a very familiar face in the state. Mm-hmm. But he was running against other people that were attracting libertarian votes, independent mind votes. Like Tulsi Gabbard, who's running. Mm-hmm. She was attracting a lot of just not Democrat as usual minds, So, and then you have Bernie Sanders, who's doing the same thing. So I think all considered progressives should be proud that, our voices were heard, and, like, we did as well. All the progressive candidates did so well. But yeah, it was a tough primary. I mean, that was a lot of candidates, over 30 candidates on the ballot. And New Hampshire is an open primary state. So literally any independent or Democrat could vote, just walk in and vote. So that has its pluses, minuses too, when it comes to when you're trying to run a campaign and fine tune it on the ground. So I think he did everything he needed to. The biggest thing is he started hitting it big after the debates, and he started performing well, and people started donating a lot of money to him. I think if he would have had bigger funds to begin with, he probably would have done even better. So, money, unfortunately, this is one thing that I'm advocating to change. It's the way we fund our politics. Unfortunately, plays a big role, how much message you can get out there. But I'm very proud of what he did here. I mean, people were receptive. His energy was great. He was always positive. He very seldom would throw jabs out during debates or during public events. He was always focused on number one and the only important thing, which was people. How do we move people forward? How do we address this? I call it a crisis that is about to hit us, which is, like, if it's not already hitting some communities, which is the tech industry stealing jobs basically and putting people in homeless situations. So the drug crisis is just an example of what we're going to face if the tech industry keeps stealing jobs. So, which is inevitable. So we need to find solutions in our community. And I think the UBI is a perfect example of that. So he should be very proud. We should not define an election solely by winning, but we should define it by the impact we have on people's lives. And I do have to say that Yang Gang has had a tremendous impact in my community, a tremendous impact on my life, and on the lives of so many people in rural America. So I don't think anybody should be upset about it. I think, this movement is very much alive, just like the, Bernie Sanders movement and other movements that happened throughout this primary election. We shouldn't be upset. Somebody asked me earlier in a podcast if I think progressives are feeling defeated. I said, I don't know about you, but I feel fired up because I'm like, you know what? I feel empowered. People like Andrew Yang came out of the nowhere and they're like, you too can do this. So to me, that's important, very important.
Hey, Carlos, what is your current day job? I'm curious about how you pay the bills.
Well, I'm unemployed currently. I've been unemployed since March 16th. That was the last day that I worked. I actually, as a matter of fact, the week before, I was in Puerto Rico campaigning, and I did endorse Bernie Sanders the last election, and I was a surrogate for him. And I went to Puerto Rico, and then COVID-19 started really spiking in the United States, so I had to come back home. And so before that, I was a director of production for a marketing firm in the hotel industry, and that's what I did for the past, 10, 12 years. I've grown in that industry. I started as basically a typical telemarketer on the phone, which Andrew Yang speaks about that industry all the time. And the company hasn't been able to open up again. My partner is the owner, and together I run the company. And basically, he did the business deals and all that. He handled the business end. We had about 200 employees, and now we're all finding ourselves, basically unemployed. And so this is a huge reality, another political reality that is hitting our lives that I'm advocating, such as expanding unemployment. I don't know when our office will be able to open again. And I'm the only, because my partner was the owner, he doesn't get unemployment. So I'm the only one in my household that gets unemployment. We have 2 kids. My mom lives with us who has cancer, so she's not working. And so, thank God there is a stimulus on top of the unemployment, because otherwise it would have been really tough past 4 months. So I'm very grateful for that. And I'm a living example of what the UBI can do for you. So, so basically, that's what I'm doing right now. My goal is to, as soon as my office can open again, to re-employ all 200 employees and get back to work. But I refuse to exploit my employees in order to make a dime. I'm one of those bosses that will stand up for his employees. I refuse to open our office quickly just because we need money. Money shouldn't be everything in our lives. And I refuse to put my employees at risk. You see all kinds of shops opening and putting their employees at risk that shouldn't be opening. So I think that we, as a politician, I'm advocating that we need to increase the minimum wage to $15 an hour here in the state of New Hampshire, just to help out the people that are on the front lines working in grocery stores and everywhere else. And then, when we can safely open back our economy, then great, let's all open up and, go back to working and contributing to society. But until these numbers go down, I don't think it's safe to do so. And it's not fair that we risk people's lives just to make a buck. So it's not a priority to me, and it's not something I'm willing to do. So our office won't be opening, and I'm advocating for the same to any business owner that I know. Don't open unless you're an essential need to human, survival, I guess. But other than that, we're not opening until things are safe for everyone, including our employees. That's the most important. And where we still don't know so much about COVID-19, we still don't. We're spiking everywhere in the country. New Hampshire has been very fortunate that the numbers have been down, but I do want to credit that to the fact that people have been so disciplined staying at home and wearing masks. So, so to me, until it's safe for all of us to be working, we're not going out. So, it's something that is nerve-wracking and makes me nervous when bills come by. But at the end of the day, I'm not sacrificing anybody, including my life, going to work and getting my kids sick and the potential of any one of them dying, or my mom who has cancer and has a terrible immune system, just so that I can pay the electricity bill or taxes. Like it's not worth it. And so
Oh, we lost you. Carlos, you're muted.
sorry. Yeah.
No worries.
Yeah. So so I will continue to advocate to people to stay at home.
Is it possible for some of those workers to perform their jobs remotely from home, or how does that? Have you thought about that? Or?
Yeah, we have talked about it. We're in the process that if by September things don't change, we'll figure that out. In our industry is a little bit tough because we do deal with reservations in person. So you know, that aspect is very tough in the hotel industry. But it is something that we're going to evolve to do. But to be honest, I'm using this opportunity to make sure that we advocate for raising minimum wage all across the state. And I think we as workers have so much leverage right now to do that, especially since we have shown like what staying at home and doing what you love or taking care of your family looks like. So I think we need to use this opportunity not to rush to get back to work and figure out what's the quickest way to get our economy running, but instead, how can we figure out the quickest way to take care of people? And so I'm politically using this opportunity to say, listen, we're looking at it this the wrong way. We shouldn't be looking at it, how can we make corporations bigger and more money? Instead, we should look at this opportunity, how can we improve people's lives? So
the minimum wage thing is an interesting topic, given that you are an advocate for raising it and also connected to a business that employs people, in that a lot of the critics of raising the minimum wage will argue that, oh, well, the moment you do that, all these small businesses are going to cut hours from people and they're going to lay off people because they won't be able to afford their staff. Do you see any of that affecting your business? Or
I see it from a different viewpoint, because New Hampshire has one of the lowest unemployment rates in the country, or had prior to COVID-19. And it was so difficult to fill positions. New Hampshire has no minimum wage. They rely on the federal government to dictate to them what they should pay their employees. And we're competing with states like Maine, Massachusetts, Vermont, Connecticut, and Rhode Island for their minimum wage. So people, young people, are leaving our state in an exodus type of way. We're actually not keeping young people at all. You know, people graduate high school and they're flying out of the state to go to college somewhere else and live somewhere else and make money somewhere else. Right now, an average family will pay about $1,200 for rent. You can't pay that at $7.25 an hour, like whatever the federal minimum wage is. Luckily, I've always been an advocate in my company of paying higher wages. So we're pretty competitive in the industry and we're able to attract people from out of state to move here. But I don't think it's enough. I don't think what the state is offering. So I'm looking at it from we need to compete with other states to keep young people here. And this is the only way we're going to do it. We have to level the playing field so that we can actually keep people in the state. So that's how I see it. And honestly, if we can invest on a $10,000 machine to do whatever, I believe that we can invest on humans. Humans are worth more than any machine that you could possibly buy from a business aspect. So if companies are willing to invest on machines big money because it's going to pay back whatever, I believe that humanity it's even more a bigger investment that we can make, that we should be making in our communities, not only to keep people working, but to give them a good life, to make sure that they can take care of their kids. I don't want to hear any of my employees coming to work and saying, I don't know who's going to watch my kids tomorrow, or like, I don't know how I'm going to feed my kids tomorrow. That's not a healthy environment. And so that's what the minimum wages in different states are creating, the kind of environment they're creating. So I don't know about any other business owner, but I don't want people to be living like that. So.
Got it. Carlos, tell me a little bit about the decision to endorse Bernie. You had the opportunity to have everyone hang out in the living room, and you kind of got to know them and in the flesh. What was that process like for you, and how did you end up going for Senator Sanders?
Yeah, I mean, it was a tough one because, like I said earlier, there was the crowd was so diverse. We even had a Latino running, which was a big deal for me. You know, Julian Castro, and you had Andrew Yang, who had such a great story. I love an underdog, and I love somebody who like is new to politics. I love that kind of primary. But at the end of the day, actually, I said this earlier in an earlier interview with somebody else that I Bernie Sanders was not my favorite at the beginning of this whole ordeal. He was actually my least favorite. I had bought into some propaganda, but because I was on a journey to host all candidates, I kind of had to swallow my pride and my ego and be like, you got to do what's fair. If you're going to host all candidates, you got to host all candidates. You either do that or you don't. And so since I was on that journey, I had a friend who works for the campaign. She goes, you know, you've hosted so many candidates, but you haven't hosted Bernie. You really should give us a chance. And like, he's a really good guy and he's got good policies and he cares about Puerto Rico. And I was like, really? So at first I went at it like, okay, prove me that he cares about Puerto Rico. So I kind of went at it like a little bit like with that kind of attitude. And he came here to the house and I was going to be in the front stage to introduce Ben and Jerry's, the famous Ben and Jerry's. And they were going to introduce Bernie Sanders. And they said, oh, Bernie Sanders wants to speak to you inside. And I was like, oh, okay. And it was in this actual dining room. He was sitting eating his lunch. And so one radio coined the term, Carlos endorsed the guy with a brown lunch bag. He had a lunch bag, a brown paper bag with lunch inside. And he said, hey, so what's on your mind? And I was like, you know, just hosting you, getting this event going. Like, I'm nervous. I'm always nervous about safety when you're hanging out with these big names. And there's so much security and undercover police, like it just makes you very nervous. And I'm in a very conservative neighborhood. So like, and I'm thinking maybe a Trump supporter will come by and it's an open air event and yell or something. And so a lot of stuff going through my mind. He's like, well, let's talk about Puerto Rico. And he caught my attention and he told me, we spoke in length about Puerto Rico. And he said a couple of things that moved me, but I wasn't made up my mind yet. So I hosted him. He had a great event, close to 1,000 people outside. Sunny, beautiful day in my yard. And then about a couple of months later, Senator Nina Turner had invited me for breakfast. And so I decided to join her. And she gave such a compelling argument and story about why Bernie Sanders needs to be the guy. I had chills, and I still have chills every time I think about it. And she asked me right there, like, can I count on you to support Bernie Sanders? And I wasn't really ready. And I was like, I looked at the staff and I was like, really, you guys gonna put me in this position in front of like a hero of mine? And I couldn't say no. I was like, you guys have proven to me that Puerto Rico matters. It's not just that Puerto Rico matters, it's about the way we talk about Puerto Rico. We oftentimes talk about Puerto Rico in a statehood type of term, instead of looking at Puerto Rico as a people, a humanity that has lost their humanity really because of colonialism, because of imperialism. And so Bernie Sanders was talking about Puerto Rico in a way that I had never heard an American politician talking about Puerto Rico. And I knew that if I was going to continue to be an advocate for Puerto Rico, I had to live by my views and my ideas to lift up Puerto Rico in any way I could. And I knew that I had the platform here in New Hampshire to do so. And so the more I got to know them, the more I loved them. I did pay to call to Andrew Yang before I made my full endorsement public. And I said how much I appreciated him and how much of an impact he had on my life. And that he could always reach out to me for whatever. I don't care what candidate I was supporting. If he needed a stamp on a postcard or a ride for one of his staff or his staff for somewhere to sleep, that I'd be there, because he was a true friend of our city. And he was like, I appreciate that. You do what you got to do. And we'll see you on the campaign trail. And I actually hosted Andrew Yang one more time before the primary, and we had a great conversation. And so And that's what was all about for me. It was about making new friends and how can we lift people. And when you focus on that, you really don't create enemies. You really don't create any bad feelings. And you know, you're doing it for the right reasons. And that's why I'm in politics. I'm not in politics to make friends. I'm in politics to lift people and the most vulnerable and solve problems in our communities. And when you focus on those things, you tend to make a lot of friends. And you know, Andrew Yang has proven that. He's you know, if the race was less crowded, if Bernie Sanders hadn't ran, he probably would have been my candidate. So
he was your number two?
He was my number two. And that's why I also believe in ranked choice voting. Like ranked choice voting would have I truly believe Andrew Yang would have lasted to the very end in this race strongly. So we need to change the way we vote in America, the way we do politics. This outdated way of colonial era, it doesn't work anymore, you know. So I'm a huge proponent of changing the law in New Hampshire to making sure we have ranked choice voting like Maine. And so that we can start putting people above parties, you know, like this shouldn't be about parties. It shouldn't be about a D or an R. It should be about, can we put the best human possible out there to represent humanity? Like, and lately it feels like we're picking the worst humans to represent humanity. And it's like, if aliens exist and came here to Earth and they saw what we were picking, they would have little faith in us. So I think if we had ranked choice voting, it would completely change how politics is done in America. And I mean, it's proven. It's ranked choice voting where it's allowed. New faces come up, new leaders, and people that have good intentions. So my advice to Andrew Yang has always been, keep going. You just got started. New Hampshire's the type of place that you have to run 2 or 3 times before you get it right. So do it again. And of course, you'll always have a friend on the ground here for anything, and they know that.
You went through a bit of a journey there in terms of getting to know these candidates and who you ended up endorsing. Who were you initially leaning towards at the very beginning of the process?
So before I was chairman, my favorite was Senator Harris. I had a lot of admiration for her as a senator. I thought she was so well-spoken, so inspirational. But I do have to admit, at the time, I was in a very different political mindset. I was evolving. I wasn't aware of her track record. There's some things that were bothersome to me after I learned them. I mean, she's not my senator, so it's obvious that I didn't know a lot about her except what you see on TV. And TV tends to glamorize people a lot, especially, unfortunately, sometimes they pick a few people of color and glamorize them instead of painting like what we people of color look like and what our lives are like. So that being said, I was very inspired at the beginning by her. And I really thought, like, if she jumps in, I'm supporting her. But then I became chairman and I was like, I got to stay neutral for a little bit because I want to host all these candidates. So she very fastly like started going down in my ranked choice. And then Andrew Yang, of course, like was up there. Some people think this is a popular choice. Tulsi was another favorite of mine, and people thought it was very bizarre because I'm LGBTQ, and she had some strong anti-LGBTQ sentiments that she had said in the past. But I look at voting records, and she was always voting with the LGBTQ community. So as far as I'm concerned, she was a strong congresswoman for us in the community. So I also had a very in-depth conversation with her where we actually were in tears talking about my coming out story and where she came from in her life and evolving in politics. And she was just so cool. She had a very similar feeling to Andrew Yang in a different way. They both were so down to earth and youthful and fun on the campaign trail. I have videos of all of us dancing on a Christmas parade and having so much fun. Well, people don't know we were dancing because we were trying to keep warm, but it was like below zero that day. But and she's from Hawaii, so. But you know, so there was a lot of people that had a personal impact. So those were like my polling always went like up and down, and then Bernie at the end stole the lead and just. But it came down to Puerto Rico. I really wanted to hear something different. I wanted people to see Puerto Rico how I see it, the struggle that I grew up in. I grew up in a shanty village on a dirt floor sleeping on a mattress on the floor next to a landfill. That is environmental racism right there. And this is what a lot of minority communities are forced to live in. Even in the United States, where Black community and people of color are forced to live near where properties are cheap because nobody wants to live there, and because they're polluted lands or whatever the reason may be, or maybe there's a nuclear plant near it. And so to me, that my life story had a huge impact as I was getting to know them and hearing them, how they were talking about people's lives. Even their off-record comments had a huge impact on me, and I was always listening, because for me this was not about me. It was about the people that I know that were suffering, the people that had died because of the drug opioid crisis. So to me it was always about preserving that beautiful landscape that you have a picture of in your background. That's New Hampshire, and we love that. For New Hampshire is so beautiful and colorful. So I'm a huge climate activist, and so that had also an impact on me and how people spoke about the climate and what they were willing to do. So yeah, but by far, I would say at the end, it came down to Bernie, Yang, Warren, Julian Castro. Those are my top four. And if you want to say top five, let's add Tulsi in there. But normally that's how ranked choice voting works. But yeah, so they all were very competitive. Elizabeth Warren came here like 4 times to our city. She was very competitive on how she addressed Laconia, and she put a lot of staff here. Andrew Yang, he was the one that visited the most. I think he came out here like over 10 times. By the time the Washington Post article came out, that was in August. That was midway through the election process. And he had already come here like 8 or 7 times by then. And to me, that was important because I wanted every person in our community to be heard. I wanted everybody to say, I was able to talk to that candidate. And it's retail politics in New Hampshire. And I wanted to make sure my community, everybody felt heard, Republicans, Democrats, Independents. So the other one that came a lot was Bernie Sanders. He did a really good job at coming here a lot and hosting big events. One of the coolest things he did is he brought Ben and Jerry's here and gave out free ice cream in the community. And to me, that was like, wow, like I got Bernie and Ben and Jerry's.
That's hard to turn down. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was really cool. Everybody was like, I can't believe I met Ben and Jerry and I got a hug from them and ice cream. And actually, I think they rolled out a new flavor of ice cream here that week. So it's pretty cool. And as a matter of fact, they have such an impact in our community. Not only they have a store in our city to sell Ben and Jerry's, but there's a Democrat candidate running for office named Andrew Volinsky. He's an executive counselor who I have endorsed, who actually got an ice cream named after him with Ben and Jerry's. So Ben and Jerry politics here in New England is very personal for a lot of people. So they love their Ben and Jerry's ice cream and they love the politics behind it. So that has a huge impact too on people's choices here. I know it sounds very crazy, but I mean, just like corn is a thing in Iowa, here is the ice cream, I guess, and maple syrup. So,
well, those aren't too shabby things to be passionate about. I have to admit, as a Ben and Jerry's consumer, Carlos, I have to ask you, being in New Hampshire, and we'll get to audience questions in a minute. My last question for you is, what's your take on people who say, "Wow, Iowa and freaking New Hampshire have a lot of influence on who the country gets as a president"? In this case, not so much. Obviously, the nominee did not do well in Iowa and New Hampshire, but you're talking about Andrew Yang going to Laconia 10 times. Like, I currently live in the Bay Area. He comes out here to raise money, but he wasn't doing the retail politics here, and I don't blame him. Obviously, that's the way the primaries are set up. But do you ever feel like, whoa, and excluding you, probably Laconia does not look totally like the rest of the country in terms of backgrounds and ethnicity and stuff like that. So what's your feeling on whether or not the 2024 Democratic primary process should evolve to kind of be more representative earlier in the primaries?
I might not be popular amongst your listeners with this, but I'm a strong believer in the tradition here in First in the Nation. I had this argument with Julian Castro actually, because he was a huge vocal critic of New Hampshire being first in the nation. I will always fight to make sure that this is preserved. The reason why is my story is no less important or more important than any other Latino in the United States. So when people say New Hampshire is less diverse, no offense, but people are actually putting down the minority voices that are doing a lot of good work on the ground that affect people across the country. So it's not always about presidential politics. We have passed policies here in New Hampshire that have been first here that literally become an effect across the country, that get implemented across the country that we all benefit from. The other thing is New Hampshire is one of the cheaper states to run for president. If you were to run, let's pick, for example, California or Texas or Florida, which are stereotypically the more diverse states in our country. A Latino to run for office there would need tens of thousands of dollars just to run for office. A Latino here in the state of New Hampshire just has to put $2 to run for office. So I think it's very important that when we're talking about how we change our political system, we don't focus on the trivial stuff. We focus, if we want to change politics, if we really care, we should change the way we finance it, the way we pay for politics, not really where it happens first. If we make it a playing field all across the country, then yeah, I have no problem, because then my story will be a common theme across the country. More Latinos will be able to speak up and stand up and rise up and make a change in their community. I know way too many activists that are not able to run because they have to have a full-time job because it costs so much money to live just as it is, never mind to run for office. So running for office is not even close to their dreams. So coming back to New Hampshire, so for example, if you want to run for president in California, not only are you going to need to raise thousands of dollars, California is a gigantic state, so you're going to need a lot of staff. So somebody like Andrew Yang would not even make it past the first round. And I hate to say that, but that would be the reality. Unless, based on what he did this past primary, he wouldn't have made it in California, just because how much money you need, how much staff you need, just how much traveling you need to do in California just to cover the state, versus in New Hampshire, you can cover the state pretty much in 8 hours. Granted, I don't know that anybody would do that. You'd be crazy to have that many events in 8 hours, but just to make my point. And then to run for president is only $1,000. And as long as your party is already established in that state, here in New Hampshire, you don't need any signatures to run for president or for any office. Most states, like Wisconsin or whatever other states, you have to gather 10 to 50,000 signatures. That's not cheap. It's not going to happen with volunteers if you're brand new. Mm-hmm. You're going to have to pay people to go and collect those signatures. And it's really a travesty to our democracy. So if we really care, if people really care about changing our democracy, let's stop focusing on the trivial stuff. Let's focus on who's first, second, or third, and let's focus on how we finance it and make sure that every candidate is able to run evenly and be able to hire staff and be able to get their message out. So that way the best comes out the winner. Let's make it ranked choice voting, So that's when people bring that theme. And I had that discussion with Julian Castro, actually live on TV, where he was criticizing. And I said to him, when you criticize that there is not enough Latinos here in the state, think about that. You're saying I'm not enough Latino. You're saying that the Latinos that I know here, the 47,000 Latinos that live in this state, are not enough to represent Latinos across the country, that our voices, that we don't know the Latino community enough to represent them. And, obviously I got some pushback on that, but that is the truth. It doesn't matter if your community has one Latino, one Black person, one whatever minority, they matter, their voice matters, their experience matters. So the other thing is, anybody that knows the state of New Hampshire, me included, and anybody has read my story, New Hampshire is by far one of the most welcoming states I've ever lived in. I've lived in Massachusetts, I've lived in New York, I've lived in Florida. As a matter of fact, I hate going to Florida. No offense to anybody in Florida. It's too hot, people are in a rush. a lot of rudeness happening on the ground. Here, people are like country style. It's like very rural when it comes to like our communities. People are very welcoming. God, I was homeless and people were inviting me for dinner. And I was like, this is a good plus. I'm not going to starve. Like, people care. And I see what happens on the ground, like with these candidates. I watch from a distance, and I've seen how people like treat these candidates, whether they're Andrew Yang from the Asian community, or Julian Castro from the Hispanic community, or women running for office. Like, everybody treated them the same, gave them the same amount of applauses, like hurrahs. So I think it's a cool experience that you have here in New Hampshire. And the other big plus is message gets lost in big states. And I think the fact that New Hampshire is so small, you're able to cover so much ground when it comes to addressing issues. And that's why, in many ways, I always call New Hampshire the lab for politics, because we explore policies here and test them here. And then we kind of like, okay, let's bring that around the state. So something like the UBI was very easy for Andrew Yang to cover without having to have a million forums to discuss what UBI is. Somewhere in California, one UBI forum would have not gotten the message across. So I think the fact that here, just with a couple of events, you're able to get the word out about what UBI is and what he was thinking. So I think we need to be careful as Americans what kind of future we want, especially when we talk about democracy, where it's so sensitive. And sometimes, unfortunately, in politics, we focus on trivial stuff, and we focus so much on that detail instead of actually changing what's wrong, what's the real problem in politics. I don't think it's the way we do primaries that is our problem. It's how we fund them. And sure, if we're going to talk about how we have them, yeah, let's do it ranked choice voting. I think, and until we address those things, I think who's first, second, and third, it's like really the wrong question. So, so that pretty much explains my take on that.
Thank you for sharing. And that's a good tie-in to the first audience question, which is, were you familiar? I'm guessing you probably were with Yang's proposal for democracy dollars. Are you supportive of that?
I'm all for it. Anything that gets, and I'm going to be strong on this one, freaking corporations out of politics. Right now in New Hampshire, there's a loophole where one person can open 100 LLCs, name them whatever he wants. And so he can maximize donation through each one of those LLCs. So each one of those LLCs are a human being, basically. And he gets to, instead of maximizing one donation, he gets to do it 100 times. So I obviously don't have that kind of money to do that. So I wouldn't be able to, like, for example, if Andrew Yang was running and I wanted to support him, I wouldn't be able to have the funds to do that. But if, let's say that his opponent has some corporate friends that want to do that, they could. And it's happening right here in New Hampshire. It's happening in our primaries. Andrew Walensky's opponent did that, and he had to return $10,000 in donations because we called him out on it, and it's wrong. So yeah, I'm a strong proponent of anything that gets rid of corporate influence. As a matter of fact, one of my biggest influencers on that policy was born here in Laconia. If anybody listening Googles Granny D, she's one of the biggest advocates and activists in the country. She walked pretty much the whole entire country by foot, advocating for campaign finance reform. She was born right here. I got to meet her before she passed away. It was a huge honor for me. Like, she's a huge influencer on the way I look at politics. And so to me, that's going to be our key to changing politics as usual.
All right, next question. What do you think about the rift between the progressive movement and Bernie Sanders?
Not sure what rift you're talking about. As a Bernie supporter and as a progressive, I don't see any rift. I mean, the only thing right now that I've seen is some people were really upset that he dropped out and endorsed Biden. But honestly, pretty much every candidate did that this past election. So if we're going to hold Bernie Sanders accountable to that, I think we can hold all candidates, regardless of where your views are in ideology. I don't really see any. Bernie's one guy. This is the other thing. We progressives need to stop idolizing people. Like, he's phenomenal. He's a great human being, but he's just like you and me. He's just another human being, skin and bones. Like, we need to stop idolizing politicians. This is how we get into dictatorships and bad politics. I don't believe in idolizing anybody as much of an influence they've had in my life. So, and I hope people hold me to that same standard too. So,
one of the related rifts we have actually within the Yang Gang is there's a contingent of the gang who are very much ready to vote for Biden. I think primarily displeasure with President Trump's leadership. And then there's a significant portion of the Yang Gang that's like, no, blow them, screw them all. We're gonna write in Yang, or we're gonna stay home, or whatever. Trump, Biden, they're all the same. What's your take on the presidential race?
I have very strong takes on that. First of all, everybody should know here that I lost. So let me backtrack. Puerto Rico lost 3,000 Puerto Ricans due to Donald Trump. So I could never vote for Donald Trump. That's not even a question. I lost an uncle during Hurricane Maria. So part of those 3,000 people that died, my uncle was one of them. He was 42 years old. He was a phenomenal human being. He had a daughter who he loved. He was a school teacher. If you are starving and you commit suicide because you were starving during a catastrophic event because of the lack of leadership in America, like, that person doesn't deserve your vote. And also, if you stay at home, I truly believe you're just as complicit as them. That's my opinion on that. I am one of those people in the progressive wing that has not endorsed Biden. I don't plan on it. I'm one of those people that will show up to vote for the simple reason that there are progressives like me on the ballot, that we do not deserve to pay the price of our presidential nominees. There are people like Jennifer Pearlman down in Florida who's running an amazing campaign, lifting up everybody, including minorities. My friend Elijah Manley, who's running in Florida for state representative, who's going to be the first youngest person to be in the state house in Florida and the first youngest Black man. He's also LGBTQ. Like, these are things that if we want to be effective and we want to create change, staying at home is not going to do that. So boycotting an election is also not going to do that. It's just going to get us the worst results possible. In my race, about 3,000 people will decide my election. I lost by 100 votes in 2018. So if 100 of you guys that are listening, let's say lived in my district and you stayed home, you literally could have made a huge difference, not only in my life, but also my community's life, because you would have somebody who's sensitive to the needs of our community instead of picking my opponent, who believes in borderline white supremacist views, who believes in polluting our lakes, who believes not at all in UBI, who doesn't believe in, he thinks that any sort of welfare program is a giveaway and just making people lazy. These are the things that you be doing by staying home. You're enabling these bad human beings to represent us as a whole. So again, I know it's tough. I've lost election, more than one. I've lost one, I won one, and I've lost at least 5 elections in my lifetime. But I know that every single time I ran and every single time I went to vote, I had a difference. I made a difference in somebody's life. I know young gay people, young Latinos that are out there and saying, wow, I feel like this is my country too, because you were able to run, I can do it too. So by you voting, you're doing the same thing. You're saying, you know what, I might not agree with Joe Biden on everything, but there are some really good, amazing people on that ballot. Let me go and vote for them, because you know what, these are the future of our country. Joe Biden, I don't know how old he is, but he's not going to be in politics forever. Like, this is our country. And like, there are so many young people, I don't want to be offensive, but there are so many young people leading right now that us not voting, we're letting them down. We're saying, you know what, we only care about our selfish needs. So I know it's a tough subject. I've had a tough decision to make this year, running in a ballot with somebody that I don't agree in a lot of policies. And I've been very, very vocal about it, but that's what we need to do. We need to hold our own accountable. And I do think then we know what to expect from Joe Biden. We also know what to expect from Donald Trump. I do know there is a green candidates running for office too that are pretty decent. I most likely will probably go November 3rd and vote for Joe Biden for the simple reason that my vote is not just about me, it's about the health and well-being of our country. And while Joe Biden doesn't represent my views 100%, I know he's not going to go and murder my people during a hurricane in Puerto Rico. I know that during catastrophes, at least I can judge him how he was as vice president. He was always very tentative to people's needs. And I do think that we as progressives, we're forgetting to leverage our vote a little bit. You know, we got to be better negotiators. So we need to just keep pushing our issues and focus on that, not focus on one individual. And the other thing is, presidents can only do so much. Presidents don't have the power to implement these laws. Like, that's up to Congress and the Senate. So really, what you need to be focusing, and we need to put as much focus on Congress and Senate races as we do on presidential elections. And I'll take it even further on your state house races. You know, my race will determine whether in my community, Republicans privatize a ski resort area, a national park, a state park area through a commission. Or if Democrats get elected, or people like me, we're going to protect it to make sure that it continues to be in the best interest of the public, and continue to stay public. I live down the street, like not a block away from what it used to be a state school. They used to house mentally disabled kids back in the 1800s, and Republicans have abandoned that property. They're letting it rot, and that's something that, as a Democrat, I want to reinvest in that property and make sure that we create something that we can be proud of. I know it has a terrible history from back in the 1800s, but I want to change that. I want to make sure that that property doesn't continue to contaminate our lands, that it just gets reinvested in, and that we create something that we can take advantage as a community. So really, we shouldn't be asking how we feel about Joe Biden or Donald Trump. We should be asking, how do I feel about my state rep candidate? How do I feel about my senator? How do I feel about my congressman or woman? Or, that's really where we have the most impact, where our vote matters the most. Presidential politics will always be what it is. I don't think that Joe Biden will be the embarrassment that Donald Trump is. That said, I also have to say I don't agree with Joe Biden's military policy. I'm very anti-military involvement across the world. We need to reinvest that money in our communities instead of bombing who knows where and killing innocent people. I'm a strong believer that our biggest export we have in our country is our people. And so we need to export our culture and go to the world, travel the world, and influence the world, and be, have people relearn who Americans are, which I've come to love as a Puerto Rican. So, so that's my take on Joe Biden. I know it's all over the place. They're very well aware where I believe and where I stand. The campaign, I've met them. He's a really nice guy. The other thing is, as a gay man, many of you may not be able to relate to this, but marriage equality wouldn't have been a reality unless Biden had pushed Barack Obama the way he did. And I think sometimes we get so focused on I don't want to call it trivial stuff, but details that sometimes is out of our control. And, I remember being very young and Biden going on CNN and saying how he was in favor of marriage equality and literally throwing Obama under the bus and saying, you have no option. It almost to me felt like they had a private meeting, and he goes, you either come out in favor of it, or I'm just going to come out in favor of it today. And that's what it felt like. And that's what good friends do. Sometimes we put our friends in a position that we push them to make the right decision. And I remember that meant the most to me. Without these rights, I wouldn't have been able to have the 2 kids that I have. So these policies have real impact on day-to-day American lives. So I will always be grateful for that. So, so there's a conflict in me just as much as there is in everybody else that calls himself progressive. You're entitled to it. You should feel the way you do. There's nothing wrong with it. It's good to have a conversation about it. It's good to disagree with people. That's how we become better Americans. That's how we become a better country. When we stop having these conversations, that's when, we fail to be the great country that we can be. So to me, I think I encourage these conversations more within our party, within our community. As long as we're being respectful and we're not calling anybody names, I'm not a fan of that, which Andrew Yang is a huge proponent of having civil conversations, which I love that in politics. One of my opponents and I have become really good friends, and we don't agree. We're running against each other. But we learn that there's so much that we have in common that we can be friends, that we can talk to each other. Another controversial thing that happened from the Washington Post, the reporter was shocked for 2 weeks after he found out that my partner had voted for Donald Trump in 2016. And I was like, it was not a secret. I was very vocal about it on social media. I was having a meltdown. But you know what? I didn't fall in love with him because he was a Republican or because he was a Donald Trump supporter, even though that didn't exist when we first met. That was no such thing as Donald Trump running for office. We fell in love with each other because we had a human connection, because there was something that we felt connected. So we need to remember that as Americans, that it's not what divides us that matters, it's what connects us, it's how we can move forward. So, and think about that in your friendships and your relationship. And next time you meet a Trump supporter, if we really want to be the change we want in the world, we have to start treating people that way. So, Trump supporters, I know they can be tough. I get yelled at all the time for my views. But you know what? I kill them with kindness. My hope is everybody has to sleep at night at some point. And my hope is that when they go to sleep, either their conscience tells them like, hey, you treated Carlos wrong. Like, you need to be kind. Or, you know what? Maybe their subconscious will give them a nightmare and they'll have a better luck next time. But, we all have to live our lives. So everybody's entitled to, I believe that everybody's entitled to their opinion and their feelings, and we need to respect them where they are at. And that's the kind of campaign I'm going to run. That's the kind of politics I want to do. It does not mean that we cannot hold our own accountable. It does not mean that we can't be aggressive when we need to be. So that is important in politics. It's a tactic that works, and I believe that we need to do that as progressives. 2008, 2012 was a really good opportunity that we progressive had to get a lot of things done, and we didn't because we sat in the silence and we thought, oh, we're okay. And then we ended up with Donald Trump, and then we're like, oh God, like now we're in the position we're in. So I think we just need to be fired up, and regardless what happens this November 3rd, it's not the end nor the beginning. We just have to keep going. We can't give up. Giving up is a privilege that none of us have. Unless you have millions of dollars in the bank and you're living in a multi-million-dollar home, none of us have the privilege to stop. There are people dying in our communities every single day from COVID-19, from homelessness, from the drug opioid crisis, from hunger. It happens here in America. People think of, third world countries as the only place that people die from hunger. It happens here. There are kids dying from hunger. About 17 to 27% of Latinos are affected. Their household is affected by hunger. So we want to change things. We can't give up. We just got to keep going. So, and sometimes it takes a long time, but we got to see the big picture.
Well, Carlos Cardona, thank you so much for stopping by the Nerd Zone and having this conversation. It's been great to get to know you a little better and hear your thoughts on things. For those watching who want to stay in touch with you and follow what you're talking about, or maybe even kind of help out with your campaign, how can they learn more about what you're up to?
Yeah, well, I appreciate it. Our campaign has been exploding in all kinds of good ways, and I appreciate that. We hit my goal this year was $10,000 to be fundraised by November 3rd, by the end of election, and we're already at that. So I've already surpassed. So I appreciate all the help from the Yang Gang and all the supporters out there. It's been really a humbling experience, and I'm honored that you would trust your money to our campaign. The best way to reach me, and I'm always very approachable, it's on Twitter. That's where Carlos was in politics was born. So NH Cardona 603 is my tag. Just come follow me. I follow most people back. I ask people to be civil and we can have great conversations. It doesn't mean we're always going to agree, but I love hearing people's takes and where they're from in the world. And so we want to keep growing and expanding on that. And, this is just the beginning, because we will have at some point down the road another primary election, and we're all going to have to come together to support whoever we want. So I think these conversations need to happen before that date. So join me and join my campaign. Our website is on the works, so we'll be posting the link as soon as it rolls out sometime this week. And yeah, I'm always open to suggestions, criticism, and comments. So join our conversation on Twitter. Thank you.
I love it, Carlos. And I don't want to put you on the spot like your Bernie friend did, but I really hope you consider Yang 2024 endorsement when the time comes. Just keep it in mind.
Well, as far as I know, Bernie's not running again for office. If Andrew called me, we would have a great conversation. That's for sure. So I feel at home with the Yang gang. Mini Yang, I'll take credit for that. Like his mom and I suggested to him that she should open a Mini Yang account, and that's how he became Mini Yang. So I feel like we have so much in common, and I want to continue to cultivate that friendship, and I appreciate it.
All right. Well, with that, we're going to say goodbye, nerds.
Goodbye, nerds. Adios, nerds.
Adios, nerds. Peace.